went over to the maitre d'. I told him who I was, why I was there, and boom, they took us around. Where do you want to sit? Kind of a thing. I think it was. I can't even remember the restaurant, but it was. Lauren Bacall was there. I saw Lauren Bacall, and these 4 or 5 men were sitting at a round table. Apparently, they were big producers or something, because she came over, hello, Bob, that kind of thing. And, it was great. I was like, now this is the way we're supposed to be treated, for goodness sakes. I find that in LA, it's who you know, very much so. It's definitely, in New York, it's more like sometimes money, but in LA, it's also who you know, but sometimes money talks in New York. In LA, it's who you know, but it all goes together.
It goes hand in hand.
Yeah, it does. It does go.
It's a funny thing that you say that too, because I think that we do a huge disservice to children in how we teach them about life and being prepped for life. Because I think that it's super important for kids to understand that their network is their net worth. And it starts at a very young age and foundationally of how you create relationships. And it's not a manipulative, intentional, it's just an is. And it's an is from an authentic position. And if you learn from the roots up, you get to make sound decisions that feel good in your gut, teaching kids intuition and gut, teaching kids how you make sound decisions, teaching kids how you align with people who are good people, who feel like you're, and I'm not saying like being insulated. This is not what I'm talking about. UN. I'm talking about how do we create communities that raise each other up, that you can grow together, you can, spread your wings together, that you can succeed together, and you can enjoy life together, and that you can be of inspiration and the example of how it can be. And I think that if we taught from that position, we would break down a lot more barriers. We'd have a lot more success that was wider spread. And we'd have a way of solving problems that had a lot less violence involved, a lot more transparency involved, and a lot more clarity involved, that everybody was on the same page and heard the same language. Because I think it's sometimes kept for a select few. And I think if you're lucky enough to be invited into those clubs or having those moments and having enough of those moments to know how to fly, why don't we just teach everybody to fly? Welcome to the Fifi Uncensored podcast, Season 3, Episode 16, with my guest Sajata, as we continue our Part 2 conversation that we had starting last week. I'm so excited for you to join us to continue to hear our thoughts and what we have so much in common with, as well as so many wonderful, deep, fun opportunities to share things that we had never and never would have known we had in common had our paths not crossed thanks to social media. Join me. Grab that coffee, grab that cannoli, because here we go.
I think I've been, I'm happy with my life. I'm not complaining, because I used to work for a cosmetic company in Europe, a Swiss cosmetic company. So I was traveling throughout Europe and things like that very nicely. And, I was their star, their superstar, I had drivers and I had the best hotels. I remember and it was gorgeous in Germany, all over the place. In one place was, I think Coty V was the store. And I would walk in and there's this huge cyber sign with my face. The head goes, one side of my head goes this way and then it all comes together. It was great to walk in like, that was so fun. So
that's a good, that was kind of like, take that little girl and now there you are on this big screen.
Yeah.
And so all of those before moments prepared you for that
Yeah.
moment.
Exactly. Yeah.
To
It
have
was the
you
first cyber
created
stuff.
that.
Yeah.
You
Absolutely.
manifested that cyberspace reflection of yourself.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Pretty magical.
Then I'm in my comfort zone. I don't feel out of place or, embarrassed or anything. I embrace it. Embrace it
Yeah,
all.
and
It's a
it's
blessing.
great that a total blessing. What years were you traveling with the cosmetic company?
Let's see. 90s,
Hmm.
90s, not too
Hmm.
long. Well, it's long ago. It's 2000,
Well, and the reason why I asked that is so for
93,
people to
95.
well, so for
Mhm.
people to understand about cosmetic world and companies and the when is because in the 80s there were only a few cosmetic companies.
Yeah,
Estee Lauder being the biggest,
right.
Elizabeth Arden, Lancome, Fashion Fair. There were Clinique hadn't really had their prescriptives yet. They didn't.
And
They didn't.
Fashion
They
Fair
didn't.
was the only line for Black women and
No,
women of color. That was it.
the
Hmm.
only line by Johnson. I know the only
Hmm.
line, and this is why I share this because, and it wasn't really until companies like Mac came along and
Hmm.
shifted. But it was when Estee Lauder also, and it was the 90s. The reason why I asked,
Hmm.
because the Bobby Browns came along, the Steelers came along, these companies that got swooped up by Estee Lauder came along, and very, very, very few little companies like that, if they had the right investors, the right leverage
Of course.
to get off the ground.
Hmm.
And from there, and still no multiracial, no just for color mentality. And let's face it, color is all layer of all levels of hue. So I personally, that's my personal.
Well,
I won't speak for you, but I definitely think there's been a lack. When I remember in the 80s going, I need to create a line for women who
ditto.
don't have access.
Yeah,
Pardon?
that's true. Ditto. I felt the same way. I still feel that way. As a
I
matter
still
of fact,
feel the same way.
I, I have, oh, yeah, no, no, no. I have a plan. I already have the plan written out and everything. I just need an
Yeah,
investor. But,
yeah. No, I
you know,
hear ya.
no, seriously. And for more mature women, 20-year-olds and 30, they have everything. I mean, it's so easy. But, a skincare beauty line, well, for all women, but for women of color, specifically formulated, but for all women, there'll be something for you as well, all straight across the board. Because there aren't that many. Pat McGrath, makeup artist, she
No,
has a line. I like her line, but it's, you know, that's a nice line, but I don't have it really in my makeup kit. Um, Iman, you have, and these are black lines. One line
yeah.
that I like is called the lip bar. I actually went to a beauty show and I saw them there, and I was gravitated towards them because they were women of color at this little counter, and so I said, "Oh, what do you?" They had lip glosses, so I bought a lip gloss, and I have to tell you, I actually liked it. So now they're doing really well. I've seen them in Target, and I'm so proud of her. She was super nice, really
Me
super cute.
too.
Yeah,
So happy.
and the lip gloss was very nice, and it happens to be cruelty free and vegan as well. It's nice.
Important. It's
Yeah.
super important as we, go forward. How do we overcome the things that, the cosmetic world has been aligned with, which is getting away from animal cruelty, getting away
Mhm.
from the plastics, getting away from all the extra junk and lead and all the things that, dyes and things that, obviously has to be synthesized in order for it to be, it's not because it can't be natural, but then natural or organic also doesn't have preservatives and it doesn't have other things. So, like for things to have a 2-year shelf life, if
Mhm.
you are talking cosmetics or a mascara that you really only want to have around for a couple of months,
Yes.
and most people have it for 2 to 20 years. I
Yes.
mean, because they don't have the proper education,
Right.
um, you know, you and I do. We both know as artists, but as people who've been doing professionally, executing makeup on people's skin, the
Mhm.
skin is the canvas. The skin tells all. The skin is your story.
And everything you put on your skin goes into your bloodstream. You do know that, of course.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and lip gloss, though, specifically, I happen to love lip gloss, but lip gloss, do you realize anytime you lick your lip, you're licking that lip gloss and it's going into your system? People don't think
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
That's why I said her vegan. I like the idea of it, the lip line. Not that I'm endorsing her, but since we're
No, but
talking,
you aligned with it because you like the way a product,
yeah.
when you like a
Mhm.
product, you naturally promote it. It's funny because, we're all in sales, even though none of us realize that we're salespeople.
Mhm.
And that's to the point. When you believe in something, you like it for what all the reasons it checks off the boxes. You talk about it. And when talking about it, you're promoting it naturally
Mhm.
because you have faith
Right.
in it from your experience.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think that comes to my next question. Go ahead. What
And
were you going to
while you're
say?
thinking about your next question, I just thought about the answer to the question that you asked me earlier about
Mm.
the Broadway play
Oh,
that I saw.
yes.
It's called Pearly Victoria. That was the name of the play. It was Melba Moore.
So you said about 8, 9 when you saw that? 10?
I think it
What,
was a little.
how
I think so.
earlier? Younger?
I think so. Well, I'd have to do a little research on that. I can't tell
Yeah.
you exactly what it is. I just know that
Yeah.
it was my first Broadway play, and
Yeah.
I was a little girl, and I loved it so much. It was so exciting. It wasn't that puppet show. It was very grand. It wasn't that
I
little.
know.
It was just so intriguing to see her. And guess what? Later in the years, I've worked with Melba Moore.
Isn't that great?
I've been a makeup artist many times. She's terrific.
So,
So
fun.
it's funny to see her as a child and then grow up as a makeup artist, and then I'm working with her. That
Well,
became,
I relate to that. I relate to
yes.
that because, also growing up as a little girl, I'd be sitting in front of the television watching shows like Johnny Carson or
Yes.
Laugh-In
Yes.
or, all the funniest
Hmm.
comedians of
Hmm.
that time.
Hmm.
And literally, I mean, I was way under double digits seeing television going, ah, and leaning in and hearing the conversations and loving those formats and
Hmm.
just being like, oh, I just love when people just exchange and talk. And, here we are.
Sure.
And what's funny about that and relatable to your Melba Moore conversation, years later, I probably, yeah, years later, I can't tell you when exactly offhand. I'd say it was like uh, it was like less than 20 years ago that I was doing a movie and there were a number of stars in it. And of course, as all of us do, your position and your who's needed to do what and who and whatever.
Hmm.
One of the actors was Lily Tomlin at the time.
Oh, I,
And so, of course, you have, I have no doubt. So
oh my.
I was Lily's personal for years
Oh,
after
okay.
starting this movie.
Uh-huh.
And my point to that is like your childhood and now doing the star, she was one of my greatest childhood influences
She was great.
as a female
Really,
comedian, smart,
so
funny,
funny.
all the things.
Yes.
And I mean, and we were like this. And one day I'm in her home and the big eat at the ant chair is in this, setting of what happened. And she, I don't even know what came up and why. And it was, oh, I know why, because the foyer was lit at the time with all these beautiful objects and they
Hmm.
were all white. And I made some comment about it, like, oh my God, look at the rainbow colors over this, all the white things. And I was like, wow, look at the way the chair looks. And, you know, that chair to me was like, my childhood was all about that chair.
Yeah.
And I used to audition, and this is will bring me to the chapter of Barbara, by the way. I would audition with doing things like Edith Ann and Baba Wawa.
Okay. Yes.
And I was getting the lead roles for these auditions of using these women who influenced me, like Gilda Radner, Barbara Walters, Lily Tomlin, and the list goes on. And you know, Lily walks over to her Edith Ann chair and sits down in it and goes into doing and performing right before my eyes, Edith Ann. And I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. And I don't get like a little, you know, one way or another. I can pretty much say the course even as passionate. But in that moment, Sajata, I know you get this. It was just like, how did that 5-year-old girl just show up in this woman's house, you know, all these years later, and being so blessed and being so grateful and having beautiful moments, and wow.
Yes.
And I know you've had that wow lots and lots. Like I've had that wow lots and lots.
Yes. Circling back real quick to the year for it, I have to, you know, Melba Moore, I gave you the play. The year is 1970.
Perfect. Exactly. I mean, I completely got that.
Yeah.
Because that's when she came into the scene. It was, now what's her period of time of in the late 60s, early 70s, where she was, and certain Black women were being like brought to the forefront and being the like breakthrough, the glass and all that. And she was one of them amongst the Diana Rosses and the Diane Carrolls and Pearl Baileys. And, you know, these women were the it of their time. And they broke through for lots of women who are doing very well for themselves today.
Yes.
Because of those women.
Because of those women. People like all that you said, and Lena Horne and
Lena Horne.
Yeah.
Oh, exactly. You're right.
You know,
Absolutely.
As fabulous as she was, she couldn't go in and stay at certain places because she was a woman of color. You know, that's so sad. You know, it's unfortunate, but things have
it was
changed.
the reality.
It was the reality. Yep.
Reality. Well, you know, the beautiful thing is yes, things have changed. And some people feel like, and things need to change a lot more. And that some cases people don't feel things have changed at all. And I do think it comes down to people's life's experiences, realities, and you know, making one seat at the table, so to speak. And that goes for women of all cultures and religions, no matter your color, no matter your education, your socioeconomic circumstances. It just is and is. I mean, I could talk about that subject for days with you about you and I doing our own, you know, because again, you know, I don't know, like, what did your father do, may I ask?
He was an electrical engineer. So there we have with the hands again. And he was very fashionable too. He was very fashion conscious because my father's father was a tailor, and my dad was always very well dressed. So on one hand, my dad was very well dressed, and then my mother was very well dressed because she was a fashion illustrator. And as a couple, boy, they were just a gorgeous, beautiful couple, beautiful people.
Well, and you know, so you had those again very positive influences. You know, so you know, being an electrical engineer, you've got to be smart with math and science and solving a problem and putting it out to the world and being sought out for what you're bringing to the table. And
That's right.
and then how you show up feeling and looking, and and then you have a couple who's mirroring each other this way, your mother in her realm with fashion illustration. I mean, again, and this was in the 60s, I take it, right? Did they
Yes.
get together? Did they get together in the 60s or the 50s, or when did they unite?
Well, before that, because no, in the 50s, in the 50s, in
Okay.
the 50s, yeah, definitely.
Okay, great. So, I mean, again, it's like, historically speaking, though they were in some very, your parents were obviously leading, in, considered, they had to be considered like outstanding human beings at that period of time, and what was happening for people versus what wasn't happening for people, what people were involved with or fighting for or speaking up about. Lots of things were going on in
Hmm.
the 50s and 60s when it came to
Yeah.
rights of human beings in this country.
Hmm.
And so to have a great job and make a living and be a little be a power couple in their own right,
Yeah.
and look the part and be the part and act the part and provide the part
Hmm.
during that time historically, that was a
Hmm.
big deal.
Yes, it was. Yes, I realized that, and I appreciated too being part of it. Very much
Well,
so.
I get that, because that also is how you ended up showing up being, and what continues to open your doors.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, a little talent, a little luck, a little skill, right?
It's all in the spices in that
Yeah,
one
it's all
pot
the
meal,
spices.
right?
That's right. That's right.
Well,
It's,
and
I've had situations or, jobs where I would do the job and then they would say, wow, you really did a great job. Or, I really, you really knocked the ball out of the park. They didn't think they gave me the opportunity, but didn't realize I would excel like that. They expected the unexpected, So,
sure. Well,
yeah.
let's face it, just Sajata, just because the title professional makeup artist comes before your name or my name, or after your name and my name, we have a lot of, and there's a lot more peers in the mix today, than even when we got started. And it's interesting because, I would imagine you would have a lot to say about, for the good, of course, how you've seen the world of makeup shift, and the world of the environment shift, and the world of the environment again shift for women of color, women in general, behind and in front of scenes. But it's all shifted during this time that we've grown up, from a little time we've been little girls to the point in time as professional makeup artists. A lot has shifted. There were
Mhm.
not private label. The private label was like only a handful of labels that I already mentioned. That's Estee Lauder's, Elizabeth.
No, I've had a private label, to be honest with you.
No, no, I private labels. I get that.
Oh,
I mean, I
okay.
didn't know you had that. I'm saying that before the 80s, there were only certain lines that existed that were
Oh,
known of.
yes,
Women like you and I got approached to have my own private label in the 80s when I had my agent and I was doing fashion and all that in the late 80s. And I literally said to the investors and my agent at the time, I'd love to have my own label. I mean, my art, my whole life. I mean, I understand color. I understand what the need is out there.
yeah,
I know skincare. I know fashion. I know all of that.
sure, of course.
What what I didn't want to do though was, I didn't want to be the private label, which
Right,
most people do. So they
right.
ship the packaging, but they have the same formula, and
That's right,
they and I wasn't willing to do that. I wanted my own chemist who only created my own brand.
right,
And I had that clarity right from the get go, because I had things that I, like you, wanted to formulate that included with skincare and color and all the things, because I understood from the ground up, from inside out, what it took to have the best results. And as a page illustrator, fashion, blah, 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 all the training, photography, film, color, no color, cosmetic world, I knew in my heart that there'd have to be this certain way. And as many times as, like you said, I've written, I have it all journalized down and broken down. And as recent as even a couple of years ago. And until it feels right in my soul and the timing's right, then it will be done.
I feel the same exact way. Exactly the same. We should probably get do it together. I feel the same exact way. I don't, because I've already done that. When I had my private label, actually I had clients come to my home and they'd have I had a little makeup room like you have a studio, I imagine. But my apartment was, fairly large enough to have an extra room that was just for my makeup space. And I had the makeup bulbs around in the table. And I would serve them juice and fresh juice and think sometimes people didn't want to leave. I had nice flowers around, that whole thing. And I thought, okay, we're done now. But, it was great because they would purchase the colors, not so much that it was as sophisticated as the makeup is now, but the colors were important. People don't know what color you should use. Should you use, you understand if you have yellow undertones or
yellow or red or
yeah. So, I could make the colors that they have for them, give them their makeup charts, and they would be repeated customers. But for me, I started traveling and working, so I didn't have time for that anymore. That's one reason why I don't, besides a couple of curveballs with life, I just didn't have time anymore because I was always traveling. I've been in the air so much. Thank goodness I don't have to travel like that now. I would if I had to, of course. But the way the world is nowadays, before I couldn't wait to get on a plane. Now it's like you get on a plane and we hope everything goes well, Fingers crossed, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People don't realize the importance of just that valuable statement you made right now. And God knows there's plenty of people with lots of opinions, and I'm not trying to make a political statement, but you're absolutely correct. And it's funny that you say that because we haven't felt that way in a very long time. And ironically, what people also don't know, historically speaking, coming up in the 60s and 70s as little kids, and something you'll appreciate, like I think it was when I was like 5 years old, and it was like the late 60s. We're flying from Chicago to to New York. And my mother leans down to my brother and myself. My brother was older than me, and said, if this plane gets hijacked from Chicago to New York. But this was a lot of, yes, because a lot of things like that were going on politically during that period of time. There was Israeli war, a lot of things were going on in the international platform. Jews were very hated and still are. The Holocaust had only happened 25 years prior, I was being taught every Sunday that history can repeat in the 60s. And I was under the age of 10. I was 5, 6, 7, and not by my family when I go to temple. And it was a Reformed temple. It wasn't Orthodox. It wasn't like doctrine beating it. It was just, we're sharing with you what has happened. This is your history, whether it happened to your family or not. This is the way of the world. It can be no matter what.
Right.
And my world, unlike a lot of my peers' world, and I don't know how it was in your household, we're made very aware politically of inclusivity, diversity, rights, who didn't have rights, what rights we were fighting for, what we were discriminating against. My family, as Sicilian Jews, couldn't belong to any country club. There was no country club that was letting us in. There were plenty of things that people don't understand as this fair, freckle-faced woman, is that I know discrimination.
Yes. It was funny you mentioned country club. We did go to a country club. But I think that I remember as a little girl going to this country club. It was very, very nice. And if I'm not mistaken, I think I played with Harry Belafonte's daughter. It was a very upscale country club for people of color, you know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we had country clubs then, which was nice. Very
There were
nice.
country clubs, and there were country clubs just for Jews or just for Blacks or just for Italians or whatever. The environment I grew up in was very white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, even though there were Blacks and Jews, but there were very few Jews.
Right.
The Blacks were on a certain side of town. The country clubs were on other sides of town.
Right.
And all of those country clubs were run by white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, no matter how many religions were in that town.
Sure.
And so it didn't matter if my grandfather was the real estate and politician, or my family was in fashion and everybody came to those stores or did business or whatever.
That's really unfortunate. You know,
but I share it because those were realities.
I know in those days, yeah, sure. I completely get it. Yeah, of course.
Which only means, not that I hold on to that. I'm sharing with you and people who listen, my empathy and understanding and my viewpoint was right in my lap.
Sure, and who you are now.
And why I don't tolerate it today. And yet, for many reasons, people don't realize that as we're trying to become more inclusive and diversified, we do a lot of separating and excluding. And we do it and repeat history in many different ways that we don't realize we're doing it. And unless people are paying attention, that's how history also repeats itself. Does that make sense?
Yes, like for example, when I was in 6th grade, my best friend was Shelley Marcus, and she was Jewish. She was my best friend. And that's when I played the guitar and she played the violin. And I used to go to her house. Her house was right near the school. And I remember for lunch, I went to her house when they have lunch in the school, but I went. And I remember she introduced me the first time. She said, "You have to taste this." It was lox.
Yeah.
I didn't like it, but now I love smoked salmon. I love it. I love it. And Shelley, she was my best friend. I mean, the other kids were great, but for somehow I gravitated towards Shelley, and Shelley was my friend. I played with the other kids too, but she was my best friend, and that's just sometimes the other kids were jealous and things like that of us because we had that type of relationship, So,
do you know whatever happened to Shelley?
No, I wish I should Google her or something, or I should Google her.
Would Shelley have been your oldest, like the first like major friendship that you formulated that you can think of from the time you were really young?
The first relationship perhaps with a Jewish girl, but not my first.
Okay.
Yeah, but not my first.
How old were you when you? Yeah, sorry. How old were you when you made that first friendship?
What am I in 6th grade? I mean, how old are you in 6th grade?
In 6th grade, you're like 10, 11.
10, 11.
Yeah. I happen to. It's really funny because even though I haven't lived in Rockford, Illinois for a very long time, and thanks again to social media and just certain circumstances, one being our mother's last few years of life and before we moved her to the desert in California. But my oldest childhood friends go back to like 5 and 7 years of age and then forward. And I'm so grateful for social media because of that reason of staying and keeping and giving the opportunity to connect. You don't have the yellow pages anymore, and you're not going to call an operator anymore. And people are like, what Hebrew are they speaking right now? What's the yellow pages of calling an operator? Well, that's what we did, people. We used yellow pages and we called an operator, local or national, to find out where Susie Marcus or Sharon Marcus, or I'm sorry, I just spaced out, but where she lives and where she was, and you could just figure it out. Now you Google her.
Yes. Mm-hmm. That's great.
Fascinating.
It is. I think social media is a great tool. You can find out anything and about everybody.
Yeah, I think you're
I Google all the
absolutely
time.
right.
I Google all
I
the time. Somebody says something, I go, and then we're on the phone, and they say, "Wow, you came up with that so great," because I also use this stylus. I have you. I can't use my fingers. I don't. I'm not the finger person. I go with my stylus all the time.
Well, that's smart. I'm a typer, so I have everything in my notes, and because I'm a writer, and so I have to dictate, and or I have notebooks and notebooks and notebooks and pens. I go through
Oh no,
ink
that's
so
great.
much. I love.
I can type. I don't have a problem. I can type, of course, but I mean, with my
Yeah.
cell phone, I'm like that. I can't do
Oh,
this.
I'm the two thumb girl.
No,
Yeah,
no,
I never thought I would be, but it's ironic that you say that because I'll never forget when phones came into the world of like how they are now with the
no.
iPhone. And that was, I think, 2007 or 2009. It was one of those 2 years because I remember being on a production with
Mm-hmm.
the leading lady who again, I was personal to and had been on this series for many, many years. So a show that you may or may not know of called Cold Case.
I've heard.
And
Yes. Mm-hmm.
so I did this. So I did the show for years with Catherine Morris, and I did all the others. And I remember when the iPhone came into play, and we were literally starting the new season, and like first day around Video Village, and all of a sudden I saw the AD whose face was in the phone,
Uh-huh.
not paying attention to this filming of the scene.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking in that very moment, because I'm such a passionate filmmaker,
Mm-hmm.
I remember thinking, oh, everything's about to change.
Mm-hmm.
Continuity is about to go out the window. People aren't
Mm-hmm.
going to pay attention and see the moments because
Mm-hmm.
they're like engrossed in these things.
Exactly.
And it was that moment. It's kind of like I equate 1983, 84 when I was graduating from college and my undergrad program and came home to remote controls and MTV and Madonna and all these people like making these music videos. And I was like, what has just happened? Like it was
Mm-hmm.
instant gratification. It was the first instant gratification
Mm-hmm.
and shift in our dynamics of what was expected, what we got, what was in our coming into our homes, what was formulating ideas creatively, artistically, musically, how it was changing the trajectory of how politics and actors and musicians and all that started to bleed into one another in a whole different way.
Yes.
Not
Mm-hmm.
because it didn't happen before, but it was just a different like platform.
Right.
No
Mm-hmm.
different than what we're doing right here. It was a whole
Mm-hmm.
different platform and a lot of doors open for that reason.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I wasn't even in the world professionally yet. I didn't get into the professional world until the late 80s. I mean, I was trained to be, but I didn't officially I don't think I really dipped my big toe until 86, 87.
Well, how did you start?
So after I went into I said I wanted to be fine arts and medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And when I dropped my pre-med after a couple of years, because I felt like my talent wasn't going to be used and I didn't have the money to continue the trajectory of continuing through med school.
Mm-hmm.
But I always was such a visual artist. And I kept looking at things like from a point of view of a photographer, but I was an illustrator, painter, sculptor. And I always thought that photography was like, oh, that's such a cheap way to go. Like that's just no, you got to really create it.
Yeah.
But I would constantly be in this mode of photographer. And my mom was like, you got to go become a filmmaker. Like you're this kid who's meant to visually tell stories. So I got into one of the only film schools at the time that existed besides the NYU's and USC's was Columbia in Chicago. And it was really at the precipice of things happening. And I was the only female in my class. And I was doing photography, film, and animation and learning all of those things. And
Wow,
then
that's great.
ironically, it was
Good.
fantastic. It was so fantastic and so
Mhm,
formulaic for me,
mhm, mhm.
and took all my theater and all my fine arts and all the way I love to communicate and interact and visually put together, and music, soundtrack, all the
Mhm, mhm,
every bit of it, fashion, lighting, blah, blah, blah.
mhm.
So, but I didn't know then what I came to learn. And then what happened was my sister, who's younger than my brother and I, had to graduate early from high school because our father had died young. So
Oh, geez,
I
I'm
grew
so
up with a,
sorry.
oh,
Wow.
thank you. Oh, thank you. So I grew up in a very, what technically was a sweet environment, but it was also a very disruptive environment because the families coming together,
Yeah.
everybody was always trying to like get in, it was there could never be like and then you're talking about Sicilians and Jews on top of it. It was passionate. It was passionate with like a Food Network table constantly of a spread of food, of like if you were sad, if you were happy, if it was a holiday, or if it was every day, you were sitting around a table eating, and
Yeah.
you're with your right. And I had my great grandparents and my grandparents and
Mhm,
my parents and my
mhm,
brothers and sisters, and then friends and families, and there was always a holiday. There was always. And so those things were very influential. I grew up with men who cooked well. I grew up with women who cooked well and baked well and had like, generations of people, some who didn't speak English and then of
mhm,
course who
mhm,
did, and took pride in being the generation who established themselves in America. And so I had this very work ethic, hardworking,
mhm,
prideful family environment. And
mhm.
then mid 70s, the recession hit our country very hard, and it hit my family's businesses very hard. And it ended up that we had four women's clothing stores at that time that were highly sought out. And unfortunately, whatever was going on really affected my family's business and my parents' relationship. At that point, they'd been married over 20 years. Um, they broke up. They decided to divorce. They finally just went their separate ways. And within the next, my parents divorced. A month later, no, 4 months later, forgive me. Uh, we lost all of our businesses. And 1 month after that, to the 5 months of my parents' divorce, my father died suddenly of a heart attack,
Oh, gee.
and we
I'm
were
so
all
sorry to hear
kids. Oh,
that.
it's kind of like a story you could never imagine writing, and yet lived it, and you just
Oh,
like,
you
what?
can't make that up. Gosh, that's so sad. Oh,
Oh, and you're right. It was. You're absolutely right. It was tough. It was hard. It
it's
was
tough.
heartbreaking.
As a child. Yeah, heartbreaking. But I gotta tell you, there must be something to Sicilians and Jewish because my best friend is half Jewish and half Italian. One of my best friends, Nicholas Piazza. He's like
Oh.
one of my best friends. And I mean, for years, for years.
Well, Sajata, I always say that Jews,
And you're
Sicilians, and
right. They
Blacks.
say he and his wife, when they have a holiday, they make the ham, the this, the that, and he's an excellent cook. I mean, I've eaten in some fabulous restaurants, but I have never had such delicious clams. He made the best clams. Like,
Oh, and
oh my
like a
God.
clam sauce with the pasta,
The
like,
clam sauce and take the bread and dip it and just, oh my goodness,
oh,
unbelievable.
can't wait for you and I to meet up and break bread together, because I
Yeah,
think you and I will have a lovely
yeah,
time
absolutely.
experiencing a few different fairs of food together, and like, all the things
Know
we
you
love,
when
from
I
the
was with
smoked fish
Barbara.
to the clam.
I said, it's too bad I didn't know you when I was with Barbara because I used to be in California all the time for the Barbara Walters specials.
Of
And,
course you were.
yeah, and I would rent a car, always a convertible, of course, and driving around, As a matter of fact, I rented my car from the Budget rental, and I think it's Wilshire Avenue, is it?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
There's a
I
lot.
don't
I
know.
mean, there's so many, right? But
I
yes, I
don't know
can
if they're still
imagine.
there.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, but I love driving around. And, when I had to go to her house in Bel Air, the gates would open, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm in Bel Air now. Oh, it was just fantastic. And I always wanted to go to the restaurant that was on Trent. And I was able to do that because her assistant got me into the restaurant. But there was a time, where was I? My best friend, who's still there, Sabrina, and my goddaughter, they live there. They're in LA. And Sabrina and I were sitting in a restaurant and sitting and sitting and sitting. People were getting seated and and I'm sitting there talking about, we're having Kir Royales, and I'm talking about, celebrity things. And then finally said, wait a minute. We're not supposed to be sitting here like this. I went over to the maitre d'. I told him who I was, why I was there. And boom, they took us around. Where do you want to sit? Kind of a thing. I can't even remember the restaurant, but it was Lauren Bacall was there. I saw Lauren Bacall, and these 4 or 5 men were sitting at a round table. Apparently they were big producers or something, because she came over, hello, Bob, that kind of thing. And, it was great. I was like, now this is the way we're supposed to be treated, for goodness sakes. I find that in LA, it's who you know, very much so. It's definitely, in New York, it's more like sometimes money, but in LA, it's also who you know, but sometimes money talks in New York. In LA, it's who you know, but it all goes together.
It goes hand in hand.
Yeah, it does. It does go.
It's a funny thing that you say that too, because I think that we do a huge disservice to children in how we teach them about life and being prepped for life. Because I think that it's super important for kids to understand that their network is their net worth. And it starts at a very young age, and foundationally of how you create relationships. And it's not a manipulative, like intentional, it's just an is. And it's an is from an authentic position. And if you learn from the roots up, you get to make sound decisions that feel good in your gut, teaching kids intuition and gut, teaching kids how you make sound decisions, teaching kids how you align with people who are good people, who feel like you're, and I'm not saying like being insulated. This is not what I'm talking about. UN. I'm talking about how do we create communities that raise each other up, that you can grow together, you can, spread your wings together, that you can succeed together, and you can enjoy life together, and that you can be of inspiration and the example of how it can be. And I think that if we taught from that position, we would break down a lot more barriers. We'd have a lot more success that was wider spread. And we'd have a way of solving problems that had a lot less violence involved, a lot more transparency involved, and a lot more clarity involved, that everybody was on the same page and heard the same language. Because I think it's sometimes kept for a select few. And I think if you're lucky enough to be invited into those clubs or having those moments and having enough of those moments to know how to fly, why don't we just teach everybody to fly?
Not everybody wants to listen, though.
True.
People don't. There are bottom feeders, and there are other people. You just can't. I don't know what to say. The world with children and technology and all that. There are a lot of people, the predators that are preying on children, and you have to be careful about that these days with your kids. You can't really. I think it's difficult to have a community like that, in a sense, because you don't really know. What?
No, I'm not talking on social media for kids. I'm talking about like ground root stuff.
Oh,
grassroots stuff.
Yeah, that's true. But after they've grown, you really have to watch them. It's just
true.
You just have to watch them, because they learn so much on social media and things, and from they get a lot from that, as well as their family, because they're always on computers and things. I think from grassroots, you have to give them a time out.
Well, yeah, if you're handing your baby in a restaurant your phone to play with it versus be interacting with what the environment that they're in,
yeah,
you've set the
you
wrong
do.
path. Yeah.
I've I've seen a video where they gave the baby the phone and the baby
Yeah.
was quiet. They took the phone away from the child and it started acting up out of control because it's programmed with this phone now. It's awful. No more. You know
I'm
how
with you.
we used to play games with each other, used to talk to each other, you
You
know.
talked with your elders, you
Yeah,
had a multi-generational
right.
conversation.
Yes.
You knew how to listen, you
Mm-hmm.
had manners, you
Mm-hmm.
spoke when you were spoken to, or
Exactly.
you knew that it was safe to speak, but
Mm-hmm.
you interacted, which
Yes.
is why again, this is why again, I created. Here's the thing. Obviously now everybody has a podcast. We both know this.
Right.
When I wanted to launch this podcast was at least 9 or so years ago, when the word podcast you did not hear. And
Mm-hmm.
I happened to randomly say to a dear friend of mine who we'd always have these crazy, interesting stream of conscious conversations.
Mm-hmm.
I literally said to him one day, I think we should create a podcast. And he looks at me and he's a pretty wise guy. And he says, I don't know what you just said to me. And he's really a curious, intelligent guy. And I said, yeah, I wasn't certain you were going to, but here's what it is. Think of it as a radio show, but that you get to create it in your own terms, at your own space and time and pace and blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I think it would be great that we did that is because we always have these really fascinating conversations that bleed one thing into another,
Yes.
continuous flow of stream of consciousness. And I said, and if I were a fly on the wall, I'd love to hear that conversation because
Yes.
that's who I am.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he went, wow, really? And I went, yeah, what do you think? And he was like,
Oh, it's
let's
great.
do it. Let's
Yeah.
try it.
How
So we
long have you had
recorded
it now?
ourselves.
Oh,
I launched the Camp
Camp
Fifi
Fi-Fi.
Uncensored.
Mm-hmm.
Fifi, it's Camp Fifi. So Fifi is for a nickname for Felicia that people have given me over the years, one of the nicknames that have been given. And it's always been Aunt Fifi, or like my nieces, I'm Aunt Fifi.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
To other people,
That's
I'm
nice.
Fifi. And Camp Fifi is because summer camps were always really influential in my life. All girls camps, predominantly
Me too.
just by happenstance.
Same
Did you go
here.
to some?
Yes, I
See?
went to summer camp.
And
It's so funny.
again, foundationally, that formulates you.
Mm-hmm.
It formulates you how you learn to live with other people who are not
Mm-hmm.
in your bloodline, who are not in your
Mm-hmm.
family lineage,
Mm-hmm.
who
Mm-hmm.
you have to learn to be a team player with, who you learn
That's
to live
right.
together with.
Mm-hmm.
It totally translates into what we do for a career.
Of course. Yes.
But you and I get that. And if I could tell you, you might be a little bit more singular in your jobs. I'm not saying you are or not. You might work with a bunch of other people, or maybe you
I'm
don't.
a little more singular.
Okay,
Yes.
well, I started out that way, and I'm really great at that. And I'm also really great on teams. I'm not great on teams who don't know how to play like a team.
Oh, no. Well, speaking of teams, in addition to being a broadcast makeup artist, I also work with entertainment in the past. For example, as a team player, I supervised the show, the makeup department for the Essence Awards, for example.
Sure,
And I worked at I was in charge of the makeup department at the Apollo Theater when
sure.
it's showtime at the Apollo, and which was really great because that's when I met a young Queen Latifah and a young LL Cool J, and it was so fun. And what's the other? Just a lot of people. It was
At
such
the
a great.
beginning of hip hop, I would imagine.
That's right. And the hip hop with the Backstreet Boys and all those people who came through the Apollo. And I tell you, when they were on stage, we were in the back just rocking, saying, "Oh, that's great! Wow, that's a great song." It was just
That's true history though. And that's ironic because, how they're now talking about the 50 years of how this has been around. and how they've just been celebrating this more recently. You're
Mhm.
talking about those careers that you watched come forth.
Yes. Now they're major celebrities and stars. It's just, I remember doing Queen Latifah's makeup, and she said, would she say, not too much makeup? I said, okay, now she's has a makeup. She's the ambassador for a makeup line, right? I mean,
For Maybelline.
yeah, who knew? So I think but it's great. I'm just, I love it when I see her. I love her show too.
Yeah,
The
Equalizer.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
good. Hmm.
I love that.
Yeah.
Curious. So, see, you and I could probably talk for not just 2 hours. We could have multiple 2-hour sit downs
Hmm.
and continue to pull back the onions, layers of onion, so to speak, and
Hmm.
discover more and more of our common threads
Hmm.
and
It's amazing.
experiences. It is pretty amazing because I
Yeah.
have to say, there's very few peers that I've come across, and I work with a lot of people. Again, I started out more singular, especially in the fashion way, in the fashion print world. But even in formerly in my career in the movie world, it started out where I couldn't work with anybody but myself. That there was no budget for multiple hair and makeup teams. You were it, and you did your whole cast, and you did the whole movie, and what have you.
Hmm.
It wasn't until I moved to Hollywood, actually, which I've now been in LA for 32 years,
Wow.
that, yeah, and I know, and a lot of people don't don't always last in this town. Like they always, describe New York as if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. I
Hmm.
really actually believe that that's LA more so than New York. In New York, you can shoulder to shoulder with people. You can run into a bar. You can be on the street.
Yes,
You're
it's
not
very spread out
isolated
there. Yeah,
out
it's
there.
very. I found that when I would go out, like, if you're not invited someplace or the places would close down at 1 o'clock, and is it where do you go?
You
Yeah, that's
don't.
true.
You better
You know,
love your home. And if
yeah,
you
you
don't
better.
love your home,
Yeah,
it's a lonely town.
but I tell you, I almost moved out there. I was really considering very seriously to move there. Because I love the ocean. I love the mountains. I love the food. I love, you know what I love? I love people wearing jeans, the way they
Mhm.
dress. Just, it's almost like an adult camp. Yeah. But at the same
Right,
time, they have beautiful jewelry on, you
right,
know, you wear,
right.
jewelry and jeans and things. I mean, when I used to go there with Barbara, Rodeo Drive knew me. He said, "Oh, Barbara must be in town." I was shopping on Rodeo Drive all the time, everywhere. It was great. I loved it. Loved it.
Listen, Rodeo Drive was at the time that you were coming out here doing Barbara, which would have been what, 2000s to the early
It
2000s,
wasn't
late
2000.
or 2000. Go ahead, talk to me.
Uh, oh yeah, it was 2000. I'm like, it wasn't 2000 anything. No, was it? It was a long. No, it's 1990 in the 90s.
So when she was doing 2020,
Yeah, because I was doing her for 2020. I was working with her. That's the first time I worked with her, actually, for
okay,
2020. And as soon as the first day, I remember that I walked into her office. She looked at me and she said, "If you can give me cheekbones like yours, you have the job," like that. And I just said, "I'll give it my best shot," you know. And then for 2020, but then one day she had the Barbara Walters special done in New York, and when they went into edit, they liked the way she looked with my makeup compared to whoever was doing her makeup before, whoever that was. And then I started doing all the shows, doing the specials as well, and traveling to LA to do her there and everything. Because she looked like, two different faces.
well, at the hands of two different people, and that can be true of lighting, and that can be true of location and all the things. But as a makeup artist, as you know, the power of that art and the power of transformation is so underrated. And it is such a subtle thing. And it is really in the eye of the beholder and the person who's executing and who's got the skill set and the training and the eye. And being in the circle that you were because of some people like a Barbara Walters and the exposure to all of those kind of personalities and successful human beings is what's interesting is you also get to see how history shifted, how history changed, but the importance of knowing your history.
Yes.
And what I feel is that people are always like you and I came up through generations where we really got that big flower of layered cake of examples. And I don't think that we don't still. I think that it's not spoken of in the same way. So you have that appreciation for how that all came together.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense. But, these days, there's so much that you can't say. You don't want to be politically incorrect. Unlike before, we had more freedom to express ourselves,
Why do you think this is called Camp Fifi Uncensored?
Because you're around the campfire and you're talking and you don't have anybody watching over your head. Everybody is on the same page. That's why. Roasting some marshmallows.
That's right. That's right. We are.
Yes.
And I think having that authentic conversation of how things are, have been, the reality, the truth, however that shows up being is important. I think it's important. It's your experience. It's my experience. We're telling our life experiences. I don't expect everybody to agree.
No,
there
of course.
are experiences.
No. You can't make everybody happy. And
no,
nor do you. It doesn't matter. Just you have to be yourself and, let the process happen. That's all. Whatever happens, I can't worry about. The older I get, the more I realize I'm not worried about what everybody else says or everybody does, or I don't let things bother me the way I used to. You don't want to stress out. Stress ages you. Don't need it. If possible. I mean, of course, occasionally there's a little stress, but that's good too, because it makes you stronger.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. Well, and that also comes with wisdom.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where one of the mission statements that I may or may not have shared with you is this platform is where the spirit is young, the soul is wise, and the life experiences are vast.
Oh, love that. That's beautiful.
Thank you. Well, that's what we create here, the space to experience just that.
It's perfect. Yeah, that is perfect. I love it.
Well, thank you so much. I know that we need to wrap things up here, and there's so much more that we can talk about. So you're going to have to accept an invitation to come back and talk more with me. Would you be open to that?
Of course, Felicia, my new best friend.
I know that. I mean, I'm thinking to myself, we would have, as little girls, loved to have hung out together. I just know it. And there's so much more we will talk about. And I'm going to leave you with this because, there's going to be one more question, and I'm going to leave you with this. So let me ask you this. Just so where you are right now, and God willing, you're going to live another twice where numerically where you are now, and that's none of my business. It's whatever it is that you want to do from here going forward, professionally, personally, and otherwise. What would you want what as little Sajata who thought into her future, sees what she's created, continues to be passionate about doing more of the same and more of beyond, what for your goddaughter, as mother or godmother or whomever out there in the world who you touch, who knows or doesn't know you or is yet to know of you, what would you want your legacy to be associated with or be?
Well, first of all, I have to say, known for being a very good makeup artist, and one of the first, especially renowned with working with renowned people and being a woman of color, and that you can do anything that you put your mind to if you really have a passion for it. And I also am in the process of, I have another passion secretly. I'm writing a book. I'm in the process of doing a book so I can actually share that with people, and I'll have a legacy of something to physically.
Well, we'll then talk more about that, because we might just have to, I might just have to help you get that out there.
Oh, well, of course. Absolutely. I love that. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's not there yet. It's in the making, but we're not. I'll let you know.
That would just be planting the seeds in the farmland. There's a lot of farmland out there that have lots of seeds.
And I love farmland. I love the country. I do.
Well,
I have to get out of
your roots do come from the Midwest, for God's sake. So, you got to like farmland.
That's a good point. Well taken. That's true. I never thought about it like that, but that's very true. Thank you for that.
You're very, very welcome.
Yes.
Well, we are gonna talk. I'm gonna hold you to it.
Yes.
We're gonna have another sit down around the campfire, and I'm gonna tell you this last thing beyond thanking you for your time today. Is before I like to think of before I sit down with my guests, like, I do think about the kinds of things I want to inquire about and ask about, and how one has become who they become, and then let things fly.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea where this came from, but I was coming from my hiking with my husband and our 4 dogs in the second largest park besides Central Park in New York. It's called Griffith Park, and I'm sure you heard of it being out in LA.
Mm-hmm.
It's where the Hollywood sign is, and it runs miles and miles across.
What's that thing up top? The
observatory, Griffith Park Observatory.
Yes, I love it there. My girlfriend Sabrina took us there. It was so great. Oh, I love California.
Ravishing. I can hear that. I hear that loud and clear, and I love that. Well, we're going to see each other more than just on Zoom. I feel that.
Yes.
You made that commitment.
Absolutely.
Strangely, as I was doing this walk and this hike, and I was thinking about us gathering together, this is crazy, and this is what I'm going to wrap this up with. I got this vision of a crisp white blouse with the collar popped up and a strand of pearls. I'm about to cry, because when you showed up finally on camera, after your technical difficulties, and started speaking, and I had the moment where I could hear you and see you, I went, oh my God, like, again, I'm getting chills. I had no idea. And there you are. And I
had that thought. Oh my God.
I am an intuitive healer, and I do things, and I do have visions, but I never imagined. And then there you were. So I needed to share that with you, because I was like, wow, okay, here we are.
Wow, is right. Thank you for sharing that with me. That is out. Are you kidding me? No, seriously, I believe you.
I would never kid you about that. I would never even talk about things like that.
That's pretty amazing, though. You ever play lottery? You have to play the lottery.
Well, I do. I do, not consistently, but I look forward to winning. And
me too.
I actually been told, because of my intuitions and healing and who I do, that I don't talk a lot about, that,
I understand.
The people that most likely that I will eventually be working with, ironically, are celebrities, which is not something I seek or go after. My point is these visions happen, and why they happen, we all have them. It's whether or not we're paying attention, but some of us maybe have them a little bit more, like whatever. And again, I don't even think about stuff like that. But when it happened in this form with all of this, I was like, no, I'm just going to share. And I'm just going to let you know that you and I were just boom. This was meant to be. It's to
Yes.
share it. It's a
Oh,
gift.
absolutely.
Thanks to social
Absolutely.
media. Thanks to all the things that our lives have so many parallels to. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I gravitated towards you because I love your posting, first of all, your dogs. And I had a dog, unfortunately. His name was Poochie. I had a little Shih Tzu, and I had to put him down, but he lived a long life of 17 years.
Amazing.
Yes, I took good care of little Poochie. And I miss him. So he originally was my aunt's dog. And then when she, I looked after her, and then after she passed, then I took him. But and I wanted a dog earlier in life, but since I was traveling so much, I just had a bird. I had a little, and the bird, actually, when I was at Barbara's house, she had this big bird cage full of, what kind of bird was it? Beautiful little birds. You know what? I am so terrible at this.
It's okay, but you know what I have to share? I have such an alignment with birds and such a love for
Really?
birds. I love that you had a bird. I've never had a bird, but I've had a lot of birds come into my life.
It's so cute. It's a pretty little bird that sings. Not this word, not like that. Tweet it. No, I've had a piece as a younger. This was a Australian Gullian finch. The finches.
My God! Oh, beautiful
little beautiful, and they have beautiful song.
Beautiful, yes.
So she had lots of them. I used to just be in awe, just standing there watching the birds.
Barbara had a lot of finches. Barbara had a lot of birds
in Bel Air. In Bel Air.
Oh, that's a great story. That's a great insight. I love that.
Yeah, they had birds. They had caught too. The goldfish in the pond.
The koi fish.
The koi fish. Yeah. I love fish too, but
I love. We have a pond with a turtle. When we bought our house, nobody told us the turtle was here.
Really?
The turtle's name is Toady, for Toady Fields, the comedian from the 60s. Swear to God. And my family's business was Fields Smartwear. So it's like, nobody told us. My husband and I came into the house. We were blessing the house, just making planting the sage with a little prayer. Next thing we know, I don't know how it happened, if we heard rustling in the pond or what. And next thing we know, we're like, what? Wait a minute, what?
Are you talking about that big turtle, the big ones?
We're talking, it's a red slider tortoise that lives in the water but can go on land.
It's still alive, right? It's still alive?
Still alive. We've had our house 19 years.
They live forever.
Forever. Like birds, like a lot of birds.
I had a client that had one in the apartment. Unbelievable.
Yeah, they're reptiles.
They live forever.
Forever. We don't even know how old Toady was when we bought the house.
That's so cute.
It's really cute. And that's great. Listen, I'm going to wrap this up again. We're going to just promise to do this again.
Yes.
And I look forward to it. And thank you for your time. And thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you. This is most enjoyable. I had such a great time. I've never spoken to a fellow makeup artist this length of time, and so deeply, and for talking about my personal life, because I'm really sort of a very private person, to be honest.
Well, it's probably for the profession that we're in, a smarter trajectory of what to be, but we're going to get into that the next time we talk. Well, because I think with now that we've laid a little bit foundation of who we are and gotten to know each other a little bit in a really delicious way, we really had the best meal together right now, getting to know each other and the why we've aligned, and our so many similarities and passions, and we're cut from the same cloth, and it's a beautiful thing. And I look forward to being able to openly and safely share things professionally that we will reveal more about in the most positives of ways in the next time that we meet and do this together. And I look forward to it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Felicia.
The power of social media and connecting us to so many people whose paths we may never cross. Take a chance. but in a way that, you feel safe and you feel comfortable, and in a way that raises you up and you have the opportunity to raise others up. Because by sharing our stories, we selflessly have no idea whose lives we're changing. So take a chance and have fun with it, because like this conversation with Sajata, that's what it's all about. Join us next week for a big reveal where I sit down with my dear friend Marie from the Netherlands, and we talk about my journey going through ovarian cancer. It's pretty juicy, and I can't wait for you to hear how things get reversed on me and questions get asked of me that I have no problem answering. So join us next week. Have an amazing week. Much love. Bye for now.